Dad, mom, big brother, big sister, granddad. Left column, Chinese. Right column, Turkic. Two peoples who wrote about each other as enemies for 1,000 years, calling their own families by the same 5 words. Everyone's first answer is coincidence, so let's do the arithmetic on coincidence. If you speak Chinese, you learned these 5 words before you could read them. Dad, mom, big brother, big sister, granddad. These are not literary words. They are the words you shouted across a courtyard. And if you speak Turkish or Uzbek or Kazakh or Uyghur or Azeri, you have just read your own language in the right-hand column. There is a published, peer-reviewed argument that the 5 Chinese words came from the 5 Turkic ones. It was made by a man who spent his career arguing that Turkic and Chinese are not related. I am going to show you exactly how strong that argument is, which means I have to start by taking something away from you. And I'm going to tell you where this ends before we start, because I'm not going to spring it on you in the last 5 minutes and pretend it was a twist. It ends at one word in the Quran, qarn, a word that means a people and also means an age. The Quran uses it both ways and never picks. And there is a man in the Quran named for having 2 of them. So the question this whole video is walking toward is 2 of what? 2 peoples or 2 ages? My answer is both. That the title is a double meaning deliberately, and that the man is remembered as the founder of 2 nations and as a figure who stood across 2 epochs, and that the tradition has been trying to tell us the second half for 1,000 years, while everyone argued about horns. Everything I show you from here serves one half of that or the other. When it is evidence about 2 peoples, it will be written in white. When it is about 2 ages, it will be written in gold. You will be able to watch the case assemble in 2 colors, and you will know exactly which claim each piece is buying. Nothing here was thought up to fit a conclusion. Watch it build and judge that for yourself. Somewhere in the comments of every video like this, someone posts a list. Turkish ata, father, Latin ata, Hittite ata, 20 more pairs, and it feels overwhelming because how could 20 words match by accident? Here's the answer nobody wants to hear. Take 2 languages that have nothing to do with each other. Nothing. No shared ancestor, no contact, opposite ends of the earth. Run the arithmetic in 2 completely unrelated languages will hand you roughly 444 convincing matches. 444. From nothing. From pure chance. So when someone shows you 30 matching words, they have not shown you a connection. They have shown you less than 1/10 of what randomness produces for free. Which is why, in this entire video, I am not going to show you a list of words that sound alike. Not one. If that is what you came for, this will disappoint you. And now that it is gone, everything I show you afterwards means something, because the 5 words in the cold open did not come off a list. They came out of a peer-reviewed journal with sound change reasoning attached, published by a specialist who had every professional reason to argue the opposite. That is a different category of thing entirely. Let me introduce him. 1 line on the board, chance alone yields 444 lookalikes. A word list is not evidence. I am going to keep a running list, and I am going to put everything on it, including the things that do not help me. Alexander Vovin was one of the most formidable historical linguists of his generation, and one of the most effective critics of the idea that Turkic, Mongolic, and Chinese adjacent languages form a family. He spent decades taking that idea apart. In 2011, with David McCraw, he published a paper in a Turkish journal, Bulletin, on Old Turkic kinship terms in early Middle Chinese, and what he reported was this. In the early Tang dynasty, a set of brand new words for senior family members appears in Chinese. Suddenly, they sit alongside the old inherited words, and then over centuries they replace them. The old words have pedigrees, solid ones, going back through Old Chinese into Sino-Tibetan and in one case into Austro-Asiatic. You can trace them. The new words have nothing. Schussler's Etymological Dictionary of Old Chinese, the standard reference, does not contain them at all. Vovin and McCraw's own phrase for it, they just appeared out of nowhere in the early Tang texts. A language does not invent 5 new words for its own parents out of thin air. So where did they come from? One at a time. Elder brother, Chinese g, Old Turkic ak, and if you are Turkish, you are already saying it. Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Uyghur, aka father. Chinese de, Old Turkic ata, elder sister. Chinese j, Old Turkic echa, Turkish ec. Grandfather, Chinese ya, Old Turkic uya, a relative, one of your own. And mother, Chinese nyang, Old Turkic ana. But look at the form he actually gives, not ana, anang. Hold that. I will come back to it because it is the single most important letter in this video. ge, niang, dai, ye, jai. This is not archaeology. Every one of those is ordinary, living, modern Chinese. A Mandarin speaker in Shanghai this morning called his elder brother Ge, and here is what a man who did not believe in a Turkic Chinese family wrote about his own finding. Not always on the receiving side. That sentence is in a peer-reviewed journal, written by a skeptic, and almost nobody outside the field has ever read it, because it was published in Turkish academic print, and the English-speaking world does not read Turkish academic print. 2. 5 kinship words in Old Chinese, from Turkic, argued by a man who denied the family. Now, that letter, ana means mother, but the form in the paper is anang, with an on the end. In Turkic, that suffix means your. The Chinese word is not built from the Turkic word for mother. It is built from the Turkic phrase for your mother. Think about what that requires. Nobody borrows an inflected form off a page. You cannot get your mother out of a dictionary or a treaty or a merchant's ledger. Every one of those gives you the plain word. You only get your mother by standing there while somebody is spoken to. Someone said, anang, your mother, to a child, and the child kept it, which tells us something no amount of argument about language families can touch. This did not happen on a trade route. It did not happen between two states. It happened inside a room in a house where both languages were being spoken, to a child who was being addressed in one and would grow up speaking the other. There is a name in linguistics for the level at which languages exchange the words for mother and father. It is the deepest level there is, short of grammar itself. Traders swap words for silk. Households swap words for parents. It's just a loan word is not the end of the conversation. It is a measurement, and this one measures as far in as it is possible to go without the grammar following. 3. The ning came with the word, households, not trade routes. Everything so far has been the Tang dynasty, 7th century, and a skeptic has a clean answer ready. Of course, there was mixing in the Tang. Everybody knows the Tang was cosmopolitan. Late contact, interesting, not deep. So let us go a very long way further back. And let us do it with a method that cannot be argued with, because it does not depend on anybody's opinion about anything. Anna Daibo works at the Institute of Linguistics of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Her method is this. Chinese pronunciation changed over time, and we know roughly when. When a Chinese word gets borrowed into another language, it carries the pronunciation of the moment it was taken, and then it stops changing. It freezes. It is a timestamp. So she takes the Chinese words sitting inside Turkic and reads their timestamps. They carry Western Han, they carry Eastern Han, they carry the earliest post-classical changes, 3rd century AD, and then nothing. No timestamp later than the 3rd century, not one. Now here is why that matters more than anything else in this video. Not Turkish, not Old Turkic, Proto-Turkic, the single ancestor language before it broke apart into the dozens of Turkic languages spoken today. And Daibo puts that breakup at around the 1st century BC. So the Chinese material is not in Turkish or Uzbek or Uyghur. It is in the trunk. It was already there before the branches existed, which means every Turkic language alive today inherited it. A Turkish speaker in Berlin and a Saka speaker in Siberia are both carrying the same Chinese words from the same contact, because their common ancestor was already carrying them 2,000 years ago. A loan into a proto-language is not a loan on a trade route. It is a loan at the homeland. And one more thing, because this is the number that reframes the whole map, you will sometimes see Turkic Chinese contact dated to the 6th or 7th century AD, which would make it recent and unremarkable. That date is real, but it is not about Turkic. Daibo is explicit. The 6th to 7th century figure belongs to Mongolic. 800 years. Of all the great steppe language families, Mongolic, Tungusic, all of them, Turkic is the one with the oldest documented relationship with China, by 8 centuries. That is not the profile of a latecomer at the border. That is the profile of a neighbor who was there at the beginning. 4. The loan sits in Proto-Turkic, 3rd century BC, 800 years before the Mongolic layer. There is one more question to ask of those early loans, and it is the question almost nobody asks. Not when, not which direction, but what are they about? If two peoples meet on a trade road, the words that cross are trade words. Silk, spices, weights, and measures. That is what commerce leaves behind. Here is what is actually in the earliest layer. Iron, gold, rank, army, to write, book, eternal. That is not a shopping list. Nobody buys to write from a caravan. Nobody trades for the word eternal. That is the founding kit of a state. Metal, rank, an army, literacy, and a word for permanence. And every item of it is dated by frozen Chinese sound change to before the 3rd century AD. Two of those deserve their own moment. Beck. the Turkic word for a lord. 15 centuries of Turkic nobility answered to it. Beg, bey, bek, bai. Daibo derives it from Chinese bo, to be elder, and notice the meaning, elder, the same field as the 5 kinship words, twice independently, at opposite ends of 1,000 years. The vocabulary that crosses between these two peoples is the vocabulary of seniority. That is not a coincidence about words. That is a fact about households and hierarchies. And Bengu, eternal. In the year 732 in the Orkhon Valley, the Turks did something they had never done before. They wrote their own history in their own script, in their own language, on stone. It is the beginning of Turkic literature. There's nothing more Turkic in existence. And they gave the monument a name. They called it Bengu Tash, the eternal stone. Tash is Turkic, stone, theirs, and Bengu, eternal, is in Daibo's Chinese layer, from Wanangu, myriad and ancient. The most Turkic object ever made names its own immortality with a word that came from China, not as a defeat, as a fact about how deeply these two had already been inside each other's mouths, 1,000 years before the stone was cut. 5. The most Turkic object ever made names its own eternity with a Chinese word, which brings us back to the room, because we can say something about whose house it was. The Xianbei were a steppe people who ruled northern China from 386. The great military families of the north, including the family that founded the Tang dynasty, married into them for generations. Note the phrase, usually unrecognized. That is a specialist telling you in print last year that the ancestry of China's own imperial elite is not widely known in either direction. Vauvan and Macraw arrive at the same room from the other side. Their suggestion is almost domestic, that bilingual young members of these mixed clans would naturally call their elder relatives by the more native word. The house in which a Chinese emperor learned to say father was a mixed steppe household, and that is not an insult to anyone. It is the Tang, the most confident, most outward-facing, most magnificent era in Chinese history. It was cosmopolitan all the way down to the nursery. That is the flattering reading, and it happens to be the true one. Now step back from words entirely, because none of what follows is a loan word, and none of it can be dismissed as one. Rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, sheep, monkey, rooster, dog, pig. 12 animals, 1 per year, cycling every 12 years. Both civilizations used it. The Chinese use it today, and the old Turkic inscriptions date events by it. The Turks were counting years by these same 12 animals, in their own language, with their own animal names, in the 8th century. Now here is why this matters more than a loan word. A shared word is a shared label. A shared calendar is a shared idea of time itself. You can borrow a word for elder brother from a neighbor you barely trust. You do not adopt somebody else's structure for counting the years of your own life and date your own royal monuments by it unless the two of you have been living inside the same frame of reference for a very long time. So which way did it travel? And here, I have to do the thing I keep doing in this video, which is tell you that I do not know. The case for China first is straightforward. The 12-part cycle is embedded in a much larger, much older Chinese system of 60-year cycles and earth branch signs, and it is attested in Chinese sources long before we have any Turkic writing at all. On that reading, the steppe took the cycle from its literate neighbor, which is the ordinary direction for calendars to travel. The case for the steppe first is less obvious and more interesting. The animals are the puzzle. A calendar built out of livestock and the animals of the hunt, ox, horse, sheep, dog, and a rat and a tiger at the edges of a herder's world, is a calendar that reads like it was designed by people whose year was organized around animals, which the Chinese agricultural heartland was not, in the way the steppe was. Some scholars have taken that seriously enough to argue the animal cycle came into the Chinese system from the north and was then absorbed so completely that its origin stopped being visible. I am not going to pick a winner because the specialists have not. The honest statement is, the cycle is attested in Chinese sources first. The internal logic of the animal set points north, and the question of direction is unresolved. But notice something. Every possibility on the table is a possibility about shared origin. Either the steppe adopted China's frame for time, or China adopted the steppes, or, and this is the one nobody argues in public, it arose where the two of them overlapped and neither of them can claim it. There is no version of this where these two peoples were strangers to each other. That is the only conclusion I am drawing from it, and I am drawing it carefully. 3. Both built kingship on the sky. The Chinese emperor ruled by the mandate of heaven, Tianming, authority granted by heaven and revocable by heaven if he ruled badly. The Turkic Khan ruled by the will of Tengri, and by Kut, heaven-granted fortune, which could likewise be withdrawn. Not the divine right of kings, where God gives you a throne and that is the end of it. A conditional grant, forfeitable on misrule. That exact structure is rare in the world. Both of them had it. 4. The Turks' own foundation legend, the she-wolf mother of the Ashina line, survives because Chinese historians wrote it it down. The Turkic origin story reaches us through the Chinese archive, and one word that has to be handled carefully because the internet handles it badly. In the Shiji and the Han Shu, Chinese imperial history, 2nd century BC, there is a transcription, Chengli, of a foreign word for sky. Debo reads it as Tangri, Tengri. So, the Turkic word for the sky is written down in Chinese state history 2,100 years ago. That is solid and it is sourced. You will also see it claimed that the Chinese word Tian, heaven, comes from Tengri. I am not going to tell you that because it has not been demonstrated, and every popular version of it traces back to an encyclopedia entry rather than to a proof. I do not need it. The sourced version is enough. Two peoples, one sky, and one of them writing the other's word for it down in the 2nd century BC. 6. Chengli, Tangri, written into Chinese state history in the 2nd century BC. Now the honest objection, and it is a strong one, if these two are so entangled, why do their languages look nothing alike? Turkic and Chinese are structurally near opposites. Turkic puts the verb last and builds long chains of suffixes. Chinese puts the verb in the middle and is famously spare. Turkic has vowel harmony and no tone. Chinese has tone and no harmony. That is real. I am not going to soften it. These are not one language family, and I am not claiming they are. But watch what happens when you stop demanding that they be one thing. In 2021, in Nature, Martine Roberts and her colleagues traced the Trans-Eurasian languages, Turkic, Mongolic, Tungusic, Korean, Japanese, back to a single root roughly 9,181 years ago among millet farmers of the West Liao River in what is now northeastern China. Chinese is not in that group. And in 2019, in Pinas, Laurent Segar and colleagues traced Sino-Tibetan, the family Chinese belongs to, back to millet farmers of northern China about 7,200 years ago on the Yellow River. Two farming expansions, two families, two grammars that ended up nothing like each other, out of adjacent hearths in northern China, and then in documented contact from the proto-stage onwards, which is exactly what Daibo measured. Two houses, one hearth. And if you are wondering whether that grammatical difference is a problem for the reading I'm about to put to you, it is the opposite. If Turkic and Chinese had turned out to be one family, you would have one lineage. What the record actually gives us is two distinct houses, sharing an origin region, sharing a calendar, sharing a theory of heaven, exchanging the words for iron and army, and writing and eternity, and exchanging the words a child uses for its own mother and father. Two houses out of one hearth. Hongshan sits on the West Liao River, the same hearth Roberts identified, which means that the founder figure at the origin of the Chinese story and the origin point of the Turkic language family are being placed by two entirely separate disciplines in the same valley. And this is the part I want to be very precise about. None of this requires the Altaic family to be real. Even the linguists who reject it still have to put these people somewhere, and where they put them is northern China. 7. Two disciplines, working separately, put both hearts in the same valley. 7 lines. Not one of them is a word that sounds like another word. 7 lines, and every one of them had to survive being wrong. Not one of them is a word that merely sounds like another word. Two peoples who spent 1,000 years writing each other down as enemies were, at home, using each other's words for father and mother. Nobody takes the word for mother from an enemy. You take it from whoever raised you, and that is where the linguistics stops. It tells you these two families sat at one hearth. It does not tell you who was sitting there, and I have not asked it to. That question is not a language question, and it does not get answered by anything in this video. If you want that question taken seriously, one Arabic word, what the classical commentators actually wrote about it, and a caliph who sent an expedition looking for a wall in the year 842. That is the long version, and it is linked below. This one was only ever about the words. Thank you for staying for them.